All right, let's talk about the Eiffel Tower. You know it, you love it, it's one of the most famous landmarks on the entire planet. We all think we know the story, a masterpiece of 19th century French engineering. But the source material we're digging into today, it tells a completely different story. A story that suggests the truth has been hidden in plain sight, and all you need to find it is a little bit of math. So, let's get into it.
So there it is. That's the question at the heart of this entire analysis. Now, I know what you're thinking, that sounds completely insane. But hold on. The argument here isn't based on some wild fantasy. It's based on a very careful, very logical breakdown of the official numbers, the technology they supposedly used, and the history we've all been taught.
First up, we're looking at the impossible timeline. We're going to deconstruct what the source calls the official fairy tale. We're going to take the story you know and see if it holds up to scrutiny. Spoiler alert, it doesn't.
Okay, so these are the official stats you see everywhere. It was the star of the 1889 World's Fair. Over 18,000 pieces of iron, 2.5 million rivets, put together by a crew of just 250 guys using, basic 19th century tools like steam cranes and hammers. And yeah, it sounds super impressive, right? A real testament to what people can do. But do those numbers actually make sense?
Just 26 months. That's 2 years and 2 months. To go from a muddy patch of ground by the river to the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Think about that for a second. Everything from digging massive foundations to sticking the final piece on top, all in 26 months.
And then there's this number, 2.5 million. Every single one of those rivets had to be heated up until it was glowing red hot, shoved through perfectly aligned holes, and then hammered flat by a team of guys hundreds of feet in the air. The logistics of that alone, it's just mind-boggling.
So you have to ask yourself, when you really stop and picture what was involved, does any of this sound remotely believable? According to the source we're looking at, if your gut is screaming, "No way," then you're already on the right track.
All right, let's get to the core of it. We're going to do a mathematical investigation. No opinions, no wild theories, not yet anyway. Just simple arithmetic using their own official numbers. And this is where the whole story just completely falls apart.
Okay, check this out. You take the 18,000 plus pieces and divide it by 26 months. That's almost 700 massive iron pieces a month, which breaks down to 23 pieces a day, every single day. And if we give them a 12-hour workday, that means a new, complex piece of iron had to be lifted, perfectly positioned, and secured in place every 30 minutes, 2 pieces an hour, every hour of every day for more than 2 years, with no weekends, no holidays, no rain delays, no accidents, nothing.
It's just impossible. The math doesn't work, period. The speed required is so far beyond what was possible with 19th century tools and manpower, it's not even a question.
And here's why. That number of 250 workers, that's just the guys on the construction site. It's the tip of the iceberg. The source calculates you'd need another 140 people just making the iron parts, 40 more just pumping out rivets, plus hundreds more for transport and logistics. So you're already at over 700 people working directly on this. But then, for every industrial job, the economy needs about 4 other people in support roles. We are talking about an entire ecosystem of almost 3,000 people, all dedicated to this one single project. That's a huge chunk of the entire skilled workforce in Paris at the time.
And what were their tools? They were doing calculations that would make a modern computer sweat on slide rules. They were checking measurements with calipers, when today we'd be using lasers. And don't even get me started on the metallurgy. The quality of that iron is so good it stood for over a century, which suggests a level of quality control that was simply unheard of back then.
So look, when you apply modern, realistic estimates to this project, the timeline just explodes. The foundations alone should have taken about 10 months. Putting the iron lattice work together, at least another 38 months. You're looking at a realistic minimum of 42 to 59 months. That's almost double the official story. The 26-month timeline is just not credible.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This analysis argues that the Eiffel Tower isn't a one-off. It's actually part of a much bigger, worldwide pattern of deception. And it all revolves around one specific kind of event.
Welcome to the age of the World's Fair. For about 50 years, these enormous, impossibly intricate buildings started popping up out of nowhere all over the world, supposedly built overnight for these big shows.
You start to see the pattern, right? London's Crystal Palace, a giant iron and glass structure, supposedly built in just 9 months. In Chicago, they built a white city, 690 acres of giant classical buildings in less than 2 years. And what do all these impossibly built structures have in common? They were almost all conveniently demolished right after the fair was over. All that evidence just gone.
So, if these incredible structures weren't actually built for the fairs, then where did they come from? This is where the source puts forward its big theory, the one that ties all these loose threads together.
The theory is known as the Great Catastrophe, or sometimes the Great Reset. The idea is that there was some kind of global event in the early 1800s that essentially wiped out a much more technologically advanced civilization that existed before us. But it didn't destroy everything. It left behind some of their incredible structures. Structures like the Eiffel Tower. They weren't built in 1889. They were found.
And if you think about it, the cover-up was kind of brilliant. The survivors, our recent ancestors, find all these amazing buildings they can't explain. So they invent the world's fairs as the perfect excuse for why they suddenly exist. They create a whole paper trail, staged construction photos, newspaper articles to sell the story. And then, once the fair is over, they tear most of them down to get rid of the evidence, leaving just a few famous symbols behind, with a brand new, manufactured history.
So you're left with two very different stories. Was the Eiffel Tower just a pretty tourist attraction made of wrought iron from primitive forges? Or was it something more? A remnant from a lost civilization with advanced metallurgy, maybe with an astronomical or even an energy-transmitting purpose that we've completely forgotten?
So what's the takeaway here? Well, the source argues that you have a choice. This isn't just about believing some wild conspiracy. It's about deciding what you trust more, the official story you've been told your whole life, or the cold hard logic of mathematics.
And that's really the bottom line. The laws of physics, the realities of construction, the time it takes to do work, those things don't change. They're constant. So when those physical realities are in total contradiction with the historical narrative, which one do you believe?
The most powerful idea in this whole analysis is that the truth isn't buried in some secret archive. It's right there, out in the open, built into the very ironwork of the tower. The evidence isn't hidden. We've just been encouraged not to look at it with a calculator in our hand.
And in the end, it all comes back to this one simple, powerful idea. Stories can be written, pictures can be faked, history can be rewritten. But according to this deep dive, the numbers don't lie. And in the case of the Eiffel Tower, they're telling a story that is way different and, honestly, way more incredible than anything we were ever taught in school.